Hi guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Chris Wright. I'm a landscape photographer working out of Granada, Spain. Now this week, this is going to be the third week that we're talking about Affinity Photo. And what we're going to deal with this week is selections. Now so this sounds like a fairly tedious and dull subject, but selections are quite complicated and mastering selections will save you a great deal of time. They, as well as being complicated, they're also quite simple in principle. And we're going to build this up from a very basic steps. It's quite a long video, this one, and what I would advise is the contents, chapter headings are in the description below the video. You can come back to this and skip to the bits that you want to focus on. But what we're going to look at are all of the types of selections, or all of the main types of selections. So we'll look at working with the paint selection tool, the Marquee tools, freehand selection tools, and then applying those selections, saving those selections so that they can be reused, inverting the selections, compounding the selections with different types of adjustment. And really this is aimed at giving you the building blocks to build landscape photographs in particular, utilizing some of the very sophisticated tooling that we've got in Affinity. Okay, so let's jump in. Okay, I'm just going to demonstrate here the basic principle of creating a selection and turning that selection into a mask on a new layer so that we can apply any effect we like to that new layer. And this principle holds true for all types of selections, so multiple selections, composites, everything. So we'll take this right down to first principles. So the first type and the most simple type of selection, probably the rectangular selection. So there's my Marquee tool. I've got a choice of rectangular, elliptical, columns, rows, and a freehand selection tool. Let's go with the rectangular one to begin with. Okay, so we've got this selected, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle across here. And there's nothing I can do with this. This is simply a selection. So if I want to actually do something with it, I can apply an exposure to it. And we can see here that it's automatically created the mask. So with the white reveals and black conceals applied to this layer only, you're seeing through the layer to the background, except for this exposure adjustment here. So if we alter that, you can see how that in the picture alters the area around the selection. Okay, so let's have a look at ways in which we can refine this rectangular tool, because in landscapes things are not generally square. So let's take the tool here and let's have a look at this corner here. So what I want to do is to sort of get at the yellows in there without affecting any of the greens, anything elsewhere in the picture. So there's my initial go with the rectangular tool. What I can then do is go to the selection brush tool, choose subtract, and just make sure I've got it chosen, and I can start to push in the boundaries of this selection. Okay, so this is actually kind of a neat way to go with this, because you're basically going broad brush stroke and then refining it, much easier to do. Now you might want to blow this up a little bit, zoom in, Let's bring it across here just so we can see a little bit better, and actually we're quite a way off from the edges there, so let's just push those down a little bit more. Okay, and I think that's probably enough. So if I want to get at those, actually let's just, can't resist tinkering, it's a really bad habit. So take that out, take that little one out. Okay, so pretty straightforward, and I can just make, let's go with an exposure mask. There's my mask, there's my selection, and as before we can make that more or less bright. Okay, so far so good. It looks a little bit fussy, it looks a little bit difficult. Surely there must be easier ways of selecting areas of pixels to alter and apply masks to. Okay, well there are. Now, all of the Marquee selection tools work in more or less the same way. So you've got an elliptical selection tool in there. Let's have a look at some of the other tools that are not bounded by shapes. Okay, so we're going to look at the flood selection tool first of all. Now, what the flood selection tool does is it will flood an area of similar pixels. So pixels that are similar in tone and color will be flooded as a selection. Let's have a look and see how that works. So we're having a look at the flood selection tool. Now this is probably the wildest, most untamed tool of all of them. This can really get out of hand very quickly, but let's have a look at the levels. I qualify that by saying on this type of photograph it can get out of hand very quickly. And the reason is because it's dealing with neighbouring pixels of a similar characteristic. So if we go into new, we're going to try and restrain the tolerance. So if I put the tolerance up to 100%, it's going to choose everything. So it'll just flood the picture, and you can see the marching ants around the outside. So we want less than that. So let's see what it does if we take that down to 50 or thereabouts. Okay, it's not really made any difference. It's gone for, I've clicked on the sky, and again it's chosen the entire picture. Let's take the tolerance down to around about 20. Okay, so now we see an immediate change. So we've sort of managed to rein this in a little bit. It's still not a very usable selection, but what you've got is effectively the blue areas, not the cloud, and then as it fades off into less blue, we're not selecting that either. But it has chosen to select one of the windmills, which is really not very useful. So deselect again. So I tend to be a little wary of the flood fill brush. It can be flood select brush. It can yield surprisingly aggressive results. And if we turn contiguous off, it'll select all over the picture. We'll take it down to 7%, and let's try and get this area here. Okay, so you just click into the area that has the characteristic of what you want to select, and that's not too bad. We'd need to push that out a little bit to get the rest of it, but or we could push this up to 10%, a little bit more. Click in the area, and that's done a decent job of selecting that surface of the rock. And if you working with this can give really good results really quickly. It's obviously clearly, if I get the tolerance right, it's quicker to do this than it is to select the outline of the rock. It's kind of working like a luminosity mask, except it's not just the luminosity that it's sampling. So let's try and get the sky with this. So deselect, and we'll choose a sort of mid-range blue. And it's done a pretty decent job of that. So the trick with this, the problem with this particular selection is it's veered in favour. So it's not selecting the darker blue up here, it's selecting this lighter blue, and the tolerance is spread across to there. So we'd need to do a little bit more work with that. I think it's perhaps not the ideal tool for selecting the sky, but let's have a look at some of the other ones. Okay, so that's the flood selection tool, and you can see that there's a bit of fiddling around that needs to be done if you want it to select, for example, a sky. Okay, so we're now going to have a quick look at the brush selection tool. So brush gives us a reduced number of nodes. We've got add and subtract. I'm going to go with the 49 pixel that was left over from my last selection. I'm going to choose snap to edges. I'm going to take soft edges off. Now what I want to do is to try to select the sky against that horizon. So let's have a go at that. Selection brush, okay, got that. Okay. Okay, so with a tolerance or with a pixel width of 49 pixels, we've got a pretty decent selection of the skyline, of the sky, and the snap to edges across the skyline has done a pretty good job here. Now there's a couple of little things that I would want to add in, so I'll go to add. I just want to get this here, and we'll just try and paint those in. Go with subtract, get rid of that. We're just trying to push this up. So, yeah. And so the trick here is, okay, that's done a pretty decent job. We'll push it up over those trees. We're looking quite good here. Okay, so take that as a reasonable. If we pull this down, readjust that. Okay, and I'm going to show you a little trick here. Next up, we've got the freehand selection tool. Now this is rather more economical and to my mind makes a better job of doing things like selecting skies. Okay, we're now going to go with the freehand selection tool, which is in the same part of the menu as the Marquee tools. So freehand selection tool is here. And the thing to look out for here is the types. You've got freehand, you've got polygonal, and you've got magnetic selections. So freehand is any shape that you want it to be. Polygonal is a shape defined by straight lines, so you can have as many stages as you want, and that can be as many straight lines at different angles as you like, as long as they meet up in the end. That's your selection. And magnetic is freehand, where we draw around the outline of something and the magnetic nature clings to the edge of that outline. So beyond that, so we're going to go into magnetic. Beyond that, we've got new. You've also got add, you've got subtract, and you've got intersect here. So I'm going to keep the default feathering, and I'm going to make a new selection, and that will go around this rock. And you can see how that's clinging to the outside of the rock here. Right, we're just going to get the rough outline. Okay, so you click once to make your selection. I'm just going to move the picture a little bit. Okay, now we can see here that we've not succeeded in getting the whole rock. So we're going to extend this selection now to get the rest of it. So bring back the selection tool, and we're going to use the add to push this selection out around here. Okay, we want to push it out a little bit more so we can go oops. Now we've got a little bit that we don't want, so we can go and subtract here. And you're basically outlining the area that you want to select, or that you want to subtract, or the area that you want to add. And it will just add it to the current selection. Now the gotcha here is that once you apply this selection to a mask, the mask will consist of the selection, the state of the selection at the time you select it. And I haven't found a way of adjusting that. So it's a case of get the selection right and then work with the mask. Now, if in principle we wanted to intersect this with something else, now the intersection would be the area that is common to two different types of selection, okay? So if we wanted to intersect this with something, the way to do it is this, and say I wanted just the outline here, I can draw around that, and it will give me the selection area that is common to both masks. Okay, so you can see that this was inside of the first selection. So if we go back here, undo set current rest, so there's my original selection, and I drew a shape that was roughly accommodates that lit up area. And this is a good way of getting at areas that are sort of difficult to draw freehand. Okay, so that's the freehand selection tool. And the last thing that I'd like to point out about that particular set of selection tools that we've looked at is that you can combine in intersect mode with some of them, some combinations of them, to create effectively a compound selection. So a good use of this would be to isolate perhaps the leaves on a tree or areas of grass. And the way that you do it is you draw the rectangle which bounds the selection, so that would contain the entire area of grass that you want to select. And then you would apply the flood selection tool in intersect mode to an area of the grass or the leaves that are of the same texture, color, tone of the piece that you want to select. And the effect of this will be to confine the flood selection tool, whereas the default mode is it selects across the entire picture. The effect of it will be to confine it to the bounds that you've laid out in your rectangle or your ellipse or whichever selection tool you've made. Let's have a quick look at how that works. A good use of the intersect mode with these tools is to blend two different selection tools in order to get a detailed selection of the area you actually want. So let's say I go here and mask this area off, right? That contains all of the areas that I want to change. And let's say that I want to change the green rather than the brown within that area. So what I can do is I can go to my flood fill, I can choose intersect mode, and I can go and drop it on the green. Okay, and what you see there is a selection of just the green areas. Okay, so that's the intersection mode. Now, I think you'll find, if you think about this and use a little bit of lateral thinking, you'll probably find this is probably the most powerful single tool, because you can make compound selections, you can then render them as masks and apply your corrections to very, very detailed selections. So I really advise having a good look at that section and going over it again if necessary, so you can really get to grips with it. If you've got a moment at this point in the video, just drop down underneath the video and give us a like. And if you're not a member, if you're not subscribed to this channel, do subscribe. We release a video every single week. So let's get on to the next section. What I'm going to do now, because we've done quite a lot of fairly complex stuff, is show you one really quick and easy way to create a mask. We're going to use the quick mask function and the paintbrush simply in order to draw a mask onto the image. Now remember, when you're doing this, always the mantra is white reveals and black conceals relative to the layer that this mask exists on. Let's have a look and see. Okay, we're going to demonstrate quick mask mode here. Now this is quite useful. So I can hit the Q button and that gives me an immediate and visible wash. And let's say we want to select this rock. Now I can do this directly on the picture using the paintbrush tool. So as we've pointed out in other videos, white reveals, black conceals. So at the moment we're working kind of virtually. This isn't yet a mask and it's not a layer. So let's just select the highlight area here. Okay, you can select a couple of little pebbles. Okay, so there we've got a selection. Let's create a mask. Or let's create a new, let's create a new layer. So we'd go with exposure again, simply because it's easy to spot. There's our exposure adjustment, and let's just kill that off. And you can see that this is applying. If I take it up to them, it's applying. We've got a composite selection. We've selected different areas of the picture effectively. And that's the application of that. So we might just want to damp that down. And we can kill that off. Now, what if we looked at this and realized actually we've made a bit of a mistake? We could go into the channels, choose our pixel selection again, and we can perhaps, we didn't want to select those pebbles, so we can flip to our black brush, paint those out, just amend this ever so slightly. And we can go back to our layer, and that has not altered this exposure adjustment layer at all. So what we can do is we make a new exposure adjustment layer, and that's given us our new mask, and now we're making alterations on that. And all we need to do then is to turn that one off or delete it. And there we have New Mask, and this is a very quick way, quick and dirty way, effectively, of working with these, with the Quick Mask utility. So there's the Quick Mask, and we've run through a variety of different methods of creating selections, but we've used them very much on a need-to-use basis. So there's a different approach which involves the necessity of saving selections for reuse later. Now, what I tend to do is to look at the picture before I start editing and work out, make notes, work out to myself what needs to be done to this picture to bring it into line with the vision that I had for the photograph when I took the photograph. And what this often involves is a realization that if I make a selection of the sky, that I may apply different adjustments to it at different points in the process. So I might apply an exposure adjustment at the beginning just to bring it into line with the land, and then later on I might want to get some more texture out of the clouds or whatever, so I apply a different type of adjustment to it. So it's handy to be able to reuse that selection. What we're going to look at now is the way in which you save a selection and bring it back for future use. So I can go back to my select menu and I can choose Save Selection. I'm going to save it as a spare channel. So it comes up here in my channels view, and I'm going to rename it Sky. Okay. Now if I go in the pixel selection here, or rather if I go in this, what I can do here, so what I've done, I've just returned to the picture from the selection, but it's showing the marching ants around that top layer. So if I now go to invert pixel selection, you can see that the marching ants are now around the bottom, and I've got a new pixel selection. So what I want to do is save that selection as another spare channel, and that gives me a good selection of the land. So now if I go back to the selection, and if I go back into my layers menu, I can now load, let's take an exposure selection, and you can see that exposure selection is simply going on the land. So let's just boost that a little bit. Okay. So I'm kind of happy with that. There's my adjustment. Bring that back, the controls. Got my mask. And let's go back to my channels, load my sky. Load to pixel selection. Bring back my view of the picture, and now you can see now that it's got that loaded. So I can go into my layers, create a new exposure one, because that'll be easy to see. And you can see now that relative to the land, I can balance out my picture a little bit more. So that's nice, and it's seamless. Okay. So what I could do here is retitle these. So I can do with that one is sky. This one was land. Okay, now that I've got these selections loaded, I've got the alteration done, I can revisit that anytime I like. So there's my land. Okay, and here's my sky. Okay, nice. We can also have the option, if we're really, creating very complex selections, we can save them to a file and use them multiple times, should we wish to. And that menu is in the Save Selection to File. And then I can load the selection from a file later. Okay, we've got another couple of selection types to look at. And both of these are available in DxO Photolab and also in Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop. Now, these tools, I think, in Affinity, personally, I think have been really well implemented. You get a very nice selection. The sliders are not too aggressive, so you can make some really nice and subtle interventions into your photograph. Okay, let's have a look at the Hue mask now. Typically the case for this is going to be to isolate colours so that we can either protect colours or target our adjustment on colours. So I'm going to add a Hue mask here, and so we go Option, click Hue Range Mask, okay? And what I'm going to try to do is to bring this right down to the so you can see this is beginning, you can see exactly what's being affected here. Okay, so keep that green. So the middle two really define the 100%, if you like, of the application of this mask, and this defines the tailing off. So if we go to view the mask, we can see this much more clearly. So as I take this, effectively select more and more of the picture. So those are the outside edges. And these are the harsh middle section of it. So let's have a look and see what we can, how this manifests. So we go back to the live view, bring back the here, and we can see that this is applying to the greens all over the picture, but it's leaving these areas, the muddy areas, intact. And of course you can go into this mask as you could with any other mask and edit it. So if we wanted to restrict it simply to these areas of green here, we can go into that mask and we can paint on the mask. So go here, get our brush tool, make it nice and big so we don't have any we're doing white reveals, we need black conceals. So here we're just taking this mask out all over the picture apart from the area that we want to reveal. Oops. Okay, you get the general idea. Just bring some of that back here. Okay. And I'll just move this and we'll get rid of this. Get rid of this area here. now let's go and make that selection again, make that adjustment again, and what we're seeing is it's simply applying to the greens in the middle of the picture. And this is a really nice, very, very accurate way of selecting particular tonal ranges. And of course, as with all the other masks, you've always got the option of inverting it to apply it to the rest of the picture. So we can fiddle around with these to our heart's content. So I think we can see here how we can create a lot of difference using the simple masks here: level, white balance, HSL, recolor, black and white, brightness and contrast, etc. But we've also got these specialist masks which I've applied here. So you've got a Hue Range Mask picking up the grass. We've got a Luminosity Mask protecting the highlights in the sky. Okay, all good. Okay, so that's the Hue Range Mask. Now let's have a look at the Luminosity Mask. Now, what I find is a really good use for the Luminosity Mask in landscape photography is to just bring a little bit of control over skies with clouds in them. So we might have a really bright blue sky, we might have some very white clouds, and if we raise the exposure on the sky or raise the highlights in the sky, we're going to blow the clouds out, but we might not want the sky to be so rich in the picture. It can be quite a distraction. So let's have a look at how we'd use the Luminosity Mask to separate the clouds from the sky. Okay, we're now going to have a look at a specialized sort of a mask. Let's have a look at the Luminosity Mask. Say we take this layer, the sky layer, and we want to increase the color of the blue. So we just want to add luminosity to that blue, but in so doing we're blowing out the whites. So we want to bring those back. Now, a good way of bringing them back is actually to add a luminosity mask to this. So we can do a luminosity range mask, and that's added that there. Now watch the clouds as I bring this down. So we're bringing back the detail of those clouds. Okay, and if we have a look at how that mask is it's a luminosity range mask, so it is applying to the whole picture, but this selection, this mask, was the sky, so the slot is really not going to be affected by this particular piece. So we can see here how it's affecting the clouds. Okay, so there's the no luminosity mask at all. If we bring this down, we're bringing black conceals, white reveals. Bring this down, and we're really looking at the clouds in that sky mask. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So come back off that. This is now as was, and the more we take that down, the more detail we're revealing in the clouds, in the white areas. Now here you're drifting over into the other areas, so you're going to start to affect the blue as well. But what this is doing is effectively it's applying the luminosity mask to the existing sky mask. So we're only operating up here. We can prove that. We can see there's no difference at all. And this is a much better way, a much more subtle way of dealing with that particular problem where we want to isolate something like clouds in here. Okay, so that's how luminosity works, and I've shown this in the context of a very deliberate application in a particular picture. There's another very practical application as well, which gives us a shortcut really to perhaps a quick edit. Okay, so what I'm going to use is the tone persona, the tone map persona, in order to apply a tone map across the entire photograph, and then I'm going to use the luminosity mask to get rid of the worst excesses of that HDR tone map, so we end up with a picture that is fairly high contrast, but nonetheless not cartoonish and much more realistic. So let's have a look at how that works. Okay, so we're going to do a two-step process here. We're going to create a new layer to sit on top of the background layer, and we're going to apply a tone mapping to that, and we're going to then apply a mask to that layer. So we're going to need to keep the background layer. So what I want to do is to duplicate the background layer, call this one tone map, and we're going to go into the tone mapping persona to do this. So let it do its work. Okay, and that has brought a fairly natural look to it. It's quite bright. Let's have a look and see what happens when we change some of these values. So our tone compression here, you can see that's what's done the job. So we're on 100% tone compression. I think more realistically, which I'm a big fan of, I'd keep it to around there and bring up local contrast a little bit. And you see that's darkening the sky, basically darkening the lights here. And now that looks reasonably realistic. So let's go with that. We'll apply that, but we still want to, that's very much like a global adjustment at this point, and it's too much. It still looks to me a little bit cartoonish. So just to show what we've got here, if I turn off the bottom layer, you can't see a lot of difference. If I turn off the tone map layer, you can see that the bottom layer is there. Right now, when I apply a mask, it's going to restrict the effect of this tone map, and that's the reason we made a copy, because after I've applied the mask, some of this layer is going to become transparent, and I'll show you that in a second, because that's the nature of masks. Is you're viewing from the top and you drop through to the background layer. So we needed this tone map layer in order to carry out the adjustments. So let's apply live mask layer, luminosity range. Now this is going to apply to the mask. Remember that white reveals, black conceals. At the moment we're full black, full white, so we're kind of neutral here. So this preview is going to give us nothing. Everything is revealed. Now if I take down the white, you can see how that's affecting it. I'm going to add a bit more into the middle. Okay, that's now beginning, at least to my eyes, to look a bit more realistic. Okay, so we also have options here. We can invert the output, which will basically turn the mask inside out. So we're applying now, although it's not shown on this, but this is an inverted mask, so we're applying to the blacks, not to the whites. Here we're applying to the whites, and linear will make this slightly more, less curvy, slightly more, and blur radius is not going to make a massive amount of difference here, but it helps to mask it in effectively. And our opacity, we can apply this mask gradually. We'll just keep it so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so there's our luminosity mask, and what we've done is we've applied a tone map and then we've masked the effects of the tone map out. And let's have a look and see how that manifests here. So if we turn the background mask off, what you see is there are large parts of this picture that are now semi-transparent. And if we look up to here, you can see the semi-transparency of it. Let's just have a look at the mask option. There's the mask. So anything that is black in here is going to be, the blacker tones, the grayer tones, the darker tones are semi-transparent. So this little bit down here as well. So let's go back, option click on that, and you can see here the semi-transparency of that, and this is why we needed that background layer. So if we turn the background layer back on, you can see the background layers pushing through the grey selections. So when before I've talked about white reveals, black conceals, there is also on that spectrum every level of grey, where a grey will partially conceal, partially reveal, and you can balance this out. So that's the quick demonstration. We've seen how we've applied a luminosity mask to restrain our tone map, and that has worked quite nicely. This looks now quite realistic. So I think at this point we'll leave this here. Okay guys, this has been a really epic video. I thought the best way to approach it would be to put it all out there. It's long, I know, but the chapter headings are down below in the description, and you can switch between sections and take it in sections and go to the section you want. So anyway, thanks very much guys if you're still with me, thanks very much for watching the length of this video, and normal service will be resumed next week. Thanks a lot guys, bye now.